Biden really, really wants to win. He really wants to win this round. He really needs to feel like we got to pivot out of Powell. And Powell's like, you know what? I can give that to you. Soros or Schwab or whomever, or Janet Yellen, whomever, would go in and bomb the price of oil. They've already told you they're going to bomb the price of oil. When they do it, they don't care about making money. What
That's
they
right.
care about is that at the end of the day, they get the policy they want, and they will take the short term hit to their balance sheet because, by the way, it's your balance sheet that they're
Yeah.
playing with.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Paradigm Press YouTube channel. My name is Sean Ring. I am the editor of The Rude Awakening. With me today, I have a fantastic guest. I've been wanting to talk to him for a long time. His name's Tom Luongo. He is the editor of the Gold Goats and Guns newsletter, which I subscribe to, so I should get that correct. But Tom, thank you very much for coming. How are you?
No problem, Sean. And you are not the first person to get gold goats and guns wrong. And if I had a nickel for every time I had a conversation with my partner Dexter White as to whether or not we should keep that name because it's so hard for people to remember, he's like, oh, all right, well, we're stuck with it now because he didn't like it either for a long, long time. But that's fine. It is what it is. I adore it. I think it's brilliant. But you know, it is what it is. So, but you're not the first person to screw it up, and you won't be the last. But you did get my name right, so that's great. Because by God, man, that's been a problem as well. So it's all good. How are you this morning?
Fantastic. I'm fine, thank you very much. Yeah, it's I'm already in the afternoon now, so I did not grab
Oh,
my glass of wine because I knew you to be on your coffee. So didn't want
it's
to be
it's
a big
always
remiss.
coffee at this point because I'm not really. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't. Yeah, drinking is just not a good idea with me in podcasting because then things get said that should not get said. So, um,
Got it. Well, thanks for that. It's brilliant, and it's interesting because you do say so many really cool things. And I just watched your latest market update. I want to talk about a couple of those things, but the first thing I just happened to catch this,
mm,
and I don't know if I caught it in context or not. But Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, she's all about this new crypto bill. Wants to shut it down in the United States because apparently that's the only way you can launder money. You're not allowed to do it through the U.S. dollar anymore. They've outlawed it somehow. But you kind of you kind of drew together like the grid scare that they're saying, oh my God, we don't have enough electricity in the United States anymore, with her bill. And I was just wondering if you could explain that, or if I mistook that out of context or
well,
anything
I
like
don't know that I link those two directly, but it's just to understand that um, they're clearly setting up a scenario where if they have to, they will take the grid down. They will, they will create a terrorist attack that they'll blame on Iran. It's like we're at the point now where lying us into war is a time-honored presidential tradition. Okay, like this goes back to the War of 1812 for Christ's sake. And because of that, we have to always be aware of the potential for what's going on. So we have, the new Alex Garland movie trailer that just came out, Civil War. We've got this horrible film by the Obamas, Leave the World Behind. Kind of trying to just telling us everything at this point that we're not even at the point now where they're like revealing their method to us, or I just had a conversation with James Dellingpaul about this on my podcast, or
that.
even the whole predictive programming, revelation of the method, yada yada yada, these buzzwords that are out there now. They're beyond that. They're into openly telling us that they're going to do X, Y, and Z, because we can't stop them at this point. And
Right.
it's meant as a form of demoralization. It's a demoralization tactic. So any grid scare, any backdoor uh, this policy that they put out there, especially Warren wanting to basically, I mean, they look, Davos has been trying to get rid of, and I make when I use the term Davos, I mean the European communist shitbags centered around the World Economic Forum and the old European money that thinks they still run the world, as opposed to the British banker shitbags who think they run the world, as opposed to the American banker shit, right? So we have to
Yeah.
make sure that we get our terminology right here. Um, they've been wanting to ban Bitcoin and ban custodial wallets for years, and just trying to get that done, um, you know, is is they'll do anything they have to get it done. They're always the ones pushing it. Because it's interesting, at the same time, I just saw something from the BIS yesterday saying, hey, according to BIS and Basel III rules, by January 2025, banks will be allowed to hold 2% of their reserves in Bitcoin. Huh. But, but yeah, exactly. The Bank of International Settlements
A central bank is central bank. Yeah.
Like, and you would think that they're all one club, right? But they're really not anymore. You've got to, like, says that windbag, Austin Carstairs, he's as bad as Warren is when it comes to Bitcoin. But then again, here we are, all of a sudden, new BIS rules. So the question you have to ask yourself when you see stuff like this, and this is all I ever do, folks, and I don't put this stuff out there saying, I know I'm right, blah, 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 blah. No. Look, here's some discordant information, right? Here's some stuff that says, hey, maybe it's not all one big club and we ain't in it. Right. And then let's run that scenario. Let's run that hypothesis. Let's run that data and see where it takes us. Let's take that and free associate on it. Let's think about it, cogitate on it, however you want to put it, and then run it out and then run it up the flagpole. And if it still continues to stick, or if it still continues to catch wind, well, guess what? Maybe it's more true than you want to believe it is, because at this point in time, when you really stop to think about what's happening, and remember, I just laid out like the reason who I consider Davos and who I technically don't consider Davos. In 2017, when I coined the phrase the Davos crowd, I considered them all part of the same club. But today, they're not part of the same club. It's clearly the Europeans, continental Europeans, are different than the British, which are different than some of the Americans, and blah, 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 blah. Like the globalist impulse and the globalists, the factions within the quote unquote globalists are different, and they're fracturing because they're all under existential threat. And so you're going to get a lot of really what looks like discordant and contradictory moves, just like Elizabeth Warren trying to ban custodial wallets for money laundering, while the BIS is saying, well, in 14 months, banks are going to be able to hold reserves in Bitcoin. Like, and that's not they're prepping us to be able to hold CBDCs as bank reserve. No, if they wanted CBDCs to be like part of bank reserves, they would just put CBDCs in the bank reserve in the policy. They would explicitly say no to Bitcoin. So that's a bullshit argument from a bunch of black-pilled morons, and they all should be. And you should deprecate anything they say about this issue by 95%, because they're just agenda spewing idiots. They're just black-pilled to the point of being irrelevant in the discussion. So, yeah, I'm in high dudgeon this morning. By the way, I've had plenty of coffee, so we're going to be in. We're going to get. This is probably going to go badly from here. All right, so.
No, that's fantastic. And it is really interesting, because I know our friend Alex Schrader still thinks the British are running the world. And for me, I lived in England for 10 years, and I'm sitting there going, how can they can't even run their own country right now. How can they run the world?
That's the point. And we can't, but look at what they've done. Look at what they've done, Sean. They have very effectively made you believe that they're incompetent, and that Britain is somehow like a cross between a Monty Python skit, coupling the TV show Coupling, where they're all just running around trying to to have sex with each other, and Jeremy Clarkson. And I got news for you: they're not. Like the people, they're all anxiety driven and everything else. But at the end of the day, the people who still run England are still the people who run England. That has not changed. And when you talk to British people, when you talk to people in the know about what's going on within the British civil service, oh no, these people are just as evil as they've always been. Yeah. And you have to understand that they're the ones that run the country. And that is an issue, and that's an image they like to project, right? And they project that image, and now they're projecting that image. Now they're so good at it for projecting that image onto themselves that now they're doing it to the United States. And why are they doing it to the United States? Well, because of course it's all about global capital flow. It's always been all about global capital flow. It's all about trying to make sure that capital doesn't leave Europe. As Jerome Powell has raised interest rates to 5.5%, regardless of whether you think he's an idiot, incompetent, this and that, and everything else, whether I don't care, doesn't matter. He's done it, and at 5.5%, there's a whole lot less leverage within the offshore dollar system than there was at 0%. Period, by definition. And if you want to argue with me about that, I'm sorry, I just don't argue with math. Like, we can have infinite rehypothecation, or we can have finite rehypothecation. How much of that rehypothecation is real has been taken out of the system? Well, I don't know. We can argue about that. But what we can't argue about is that Powell's done it. Okay. And at the same time, financial conditions in the United States are as good as they've been since after the pandemic. So clearly, the United States economy can handle 5.5% interest rates, but can the rest of the world?
Right. And it can't. And that
And it
was
can't, clearly. And
now,
they're the ones all
yeah,
screaming fucking bloody murder for him to freaking pivot.
that's
And
right.
yet everybody wants to look at this situation and go, "Oh no! Powell's a moron, and he's Arthur Burns 2.0. He's not Arthur Burns 2.0. He's already the second coming of Burns and Volcker all wrapped up into one.
Hmm.
I mean,
It's
because the system is more fragile than it was in 1980. There isn't as much balance sheet room. We do have tremendous deficits that matter, and debts and debt servicing numbers that are astronomical now. Yeah, and maybe all we can expect is 5.5% out of Powell. And when in a year and a half ago, when everybody said, "Well, Powell will get the 1%, and then he'll have to turn pivot," and or 2 years ago, or a year and a half, a year and a half ago, he'll get the 1% and he'll have to turn pivot and go back down to the zero bound. They were thinking then in terms of him being Arthur Burns,
right,
and he didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
He went from 25 to 50 to 75 4 times, and then started slacking off.
Yeah.
And now he's already done the Volcker thing. Maybe we're all expecting him to become Paul Volcker when he's already become Paul Volcker.
Right.
And maybe that's a better way of looking at this as to whether or not Powell pivoted the other day together. I don't think he did. I think the FOMC pivoted. And I have very good reasons as to why I think the FOMC pivoted. And we can go into that. Okay. Well, let's go back to the before time, before Powell was renominated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let's go back to how I came to the conclusion that Biden didn't want Powell in the first place. Right. Because Powell should have been reconfirmed in October of 2021 for, his term ending in January or February. And he wasn't. And then all of a sudden in October of 2021, there was this insider trading scandal. Remember that? And Powell was implicated in it.
Oh, right. Okay.
And 3 Fed governors lost their jobs, Kaplan,
right.
and Rosengren, right?
That one, yes.
Powell was implicated in this, and Powell was able to skate. And who was behind that? Well, Brainerd, because she was the one who signed off on the trades. Everybody, because she was the compliance officer for the FOMC. She signed off on all these trades, and then she leaked them to BuzzFeed or whoever it was that ran with it, because she was tapped by Biden and Obama to become the Federal Reserve chair. Danielle DiMartino Booth has confirmed all this. That was my theory back then, and then she literally confirmed it in an interview after interview during that time period. Okay, right. Kaplan, Karita, and Rosengren, and then they play fast and loose with Powell's reconfirmation for 4 months. Mm-hmm. in that time, and knowing full well that they couldn't get Brainerd through the Senate. Brainerd could never get more than 30 votes in the Senate.
Wow.
Which is why it was never going to work. So what did they do? They got rid of Kaplan, Karita, and Rosengren and replaced them with Uber Dove, and Uber Dove. Like, they've destroyed the Federal Reserve Board, okay, right, in order to take 3 of Powell's lieutenants away from him and put 3 shitbag communists, Sarah Bloom Raskin and a couple of other these horrible human beings, on the Federal Reserve Board. Why? Because if you have more doves on the Federal Reserve Board, then when the moment comes when Davos and the markets are screaming bloody fucking murder that you need to pivot, you bastard, that's when you activate them. That's when and they started the process of setting the narrative on the dot plot 6 months ago, after Powell raised the last time to 5.5% during the March, because he raised it. He didn't raise it. He raised the 5.25% during Silicon Valley Bank. Right. So in the middle of the banking crisis, this guy raises by 25 basis points, and people still think that he's Arthur Burns. Like, I don't know. I don't know what you're smoking, but it must be really good shit. So these are the days of Perky Pat, and you're still chewing on you're still like doing I don't know. You're in this alternate reality created by Philip K. Dick. It's like, I don't understand the world you live in, that a Federal Reserve chairman would raise by 1/4 point.
Yeah.
And say, I'm not cutting interest rates until 2025 during the middle of a regional banking crisis.
Yeah.
And yet somehow this guy is still not who he is. Okay. So now, but right after that, we get the dot plot comes to hove into focus. The Overton window around the Fed meetings, knowing full well they couldn't move Powell, Now you start working the dot plot. They did it at July. They did it at September. They did it in October. They did it in September, and now December. And what did they do? And I saw, Zero Hedge, and Zero Hedge has lost the script on this completely. And fuck them if they're going to be this way. Because I've been right, they've been wrong, and now I don't get to be on Zero Hedge. Not that I'm salty about this or anything, but they're wrong. I mean, they're just wrong, and they're obviously wrong because they're out there at the same time as they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they've been wrong about this. They're like running articles from Bloomberg stating, oh, a whole bunch of FOMC members at the last minute changed their dot plot projections. Right. At the last minute. Oh, well, we saw the new data and we changed it. No, you didn't. No, you got a phone call from the Biden administration. Right. Because the market had clearly said, we think 4.9% is going to be the median dot plot for 2024. It's got to come in at 4.6 so that we can have our end of the year rally, and we can write the algorithms and tell the algorithms in the world that Powell pivoted. Meanwhile, Powell goes out there, gives a press conference where not any of his opinions about his personal position have changed one whit. What he kept,
it was the shortest time he spoke for forever, right? Like it's the shortest.
And all he did was said, and all he kept saying over and over again was, the FOMC board feels. The FOMC board feels. It's like Putin saying, I know who the decision makers are. They're the Anglo-Saxons, not the Americans, right? Because what he's saying is the decision makers on the war in Ukraine are the British, not necessarily the Americans. When he uses the phrase the Anglo-Saxons, he's trying to split off one faction from the other and give. And let people who are actually listening to him give them the clues as to what's going on. It's the same thing with Powell the other day. He was clearly saying to everyone, the FOMC board changed their opinion, but I have not. Right. So they got very little policy statement change through. Why is that? Yeah. Because Powell's still in charge of Powell's still in charge of the policy meeting. He's still in charge of interest rates ultimately. So nothing materially about the FOMC has changed, except everybody's perception of it. Right. That's it. And that's fascinating. So now the big question is, when is the Fed going to pivot? Well, clearly the market wants a March pivot, right. March cut. I was watching Danielle DiMartino Booth the other day on Fox News, and she thinks May. Okay. Right. And that's fine. And that's fair given Danielle's frame is always domestic policy, domestic economy first, and everything else second. And I'm not saying that to in any way to disparage Danielle. I think that's just what she's good at. That's what she's focused on. My focus is always on what's the global picture and right. what people really, really want. And then let's take into consideration the fact that it's an election year. Yeah. If Powell cuts before July, if Powell cuts in March, it's clearly, okay, the Biden administration threatened his children. If he cuts in May, it's the Goldilocks scenario, as Danielle says. It's not too close to the election, but it's not going to have any real effect on the economy until after the election, so it doesn't really matter. He can get away with it, virtue signal, and do what he needs to do. Mm-hmm. If he cuts in July, if he doesn't cut in May, and he cuts, as I would think, in July or September, because maybe there's a financial crisis, another Lehman Brothers, mm-hmm. right? Like they engineered in 2008 in order to make sure that Barack Obama got elected. Hmm. If you hold off the cut until then you force their hand to create a crisis on the verge of the election. And who do you blame that on? At that point, that's the Fed tipping their hand saying, look, we don't want Biden returning. We don't want the Democrats returning. We're going to hold this as long as possible. We're going to weather the political storm as much as possible by not cutting interest rates. And we'll just keep dovishly, and we'll keep with relatively dovish communication, which will give markets the false hope that he's changing policy sooner rather than later. And that way he can't be accused of playing politics. It neuters Elizabeth Warren going out there screaming about how Jerome Powell took your home from you, and Jerome Powell took your job from you, mm-hmm. right? Because that's clearly what they're going to do. That's clearly the narrative they're already running with. They've already started this narrative. Like they've already prepped all this stuff. So this is where we are for the 2024 election cycle. And we'll see. I don't know. I mean, Danielle may be right. I don't know. I hope I'm right. I hope Powell holds on for as long as possible to really just put an exclamation point on this entire period of history. Because if he does so, then we'll get rid of a lot of these Davosian sons of bitches and traitors that are running the country currently. Mike Johnson and company can start, the process of fiscal of the fiscal sanity. This huge bond rally gives Janet Yellen no excuse whatsoever to restrict the supply of 10 years anymore, to keep the 210 spread as wide as possible in order to keep, making the argument that the United States economy is a mess and we're going to have a recession and blah, 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 blah. Like, no, you're doing that to save Christine Lagarde over DCB. Like we can't see you, you dumb bitch. Like, how dumb do you think we really are? Like, is Janet Yellen like the dumbest person outside of Joe Biden in the public sphere at this point?
I crack up because I'm the only Paradigm editor who lives in Europe, and it astounds me on how bearish some of my colleagues are on the dollar. And I'm like, why would you ever want to own a euro or a pound or a yen? And that's 81% of the dollar index basket. It's beyond me. I don't get
No, I get it. I'm not the world's biggest dollar bear. I'm not a dollar bull or anything. I'm not, Brent Johnson and dollar milkshake theory or anything. Though Brent and I get along really well. He was on my podcast. We had a great talk, and I respect the hell out of everything he's ever put out there, because some of his arguments are, I came to the same conclusion that he did from a different perspective. Is really what it comes down to, right? And it was a hard one argument for me. It was I didn't want to buy this argument either, but I'm like, but it was Martin Armstrong that, like, in 2015, that convinced me that the euro was dead, because it was just a structural argument, and it's just that simple. And we'll see what happens. And now they want to bring Ukraine into the fold. This is hilarious.
Oh, and Orban got his $10 billion. I wrote about that this morning, which cracked me up, because Hungary wants no part of that. He's like, all right, I'll walk out of the meeting, but I'll walk out with 10 billion.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what he had to do, and I think he did that. And I think he did that. It was interesting. I have a friend of mine in Hungary who feeds me stuff all the time. Every once in a while, she calls me in a panic, because she's worried about the future of her country and whatnot, and that's fine. And I love her to death, because she's always keeping me up to date on Hungary. And they're wonderful, wonderful people. And I've been trying to have this trying to figure out when I would have some time to actually cover this properly, right, in public, because it does need to be talked about. So it's good that it's actually brought out there. So yes, what happened with Orban was clearly look, we're going to give you the $10 billion that we stole from you originally, that we should have never taken from you, but we need you to allow the process to go forward for Ukraine accession talks into the EU. And he said, okay. And then he turns around this morning and blocks $50 billion worth of aid to Ukraine.
That's right. Did he actually get the block through? Because the last I read, he abstained from the vote, but he blocked the $50 billion. That's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. He blocked the $50 billion, got his $10 billion, but has allowed the process to go forward for the accession talks. But here's the thing: do you think he and Slovakia and the Czechs and a couple of others aren't going to slow roll all this until July, when Hungary takes over the presidency of the European Council?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that air you think you're breathing? Like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, like I'll give Victor his due. It's like Powell in so many ways. Like, nothing's perfect. Like, they can't always say no. You have to negotiate every once in a while. And I think what Powell did the other day was very deft in saying, look, Biden really, really wants to win. He really wants to win this round. He really needs to feel like we got to pivot out of Powell. And Powell's like, you know what? I can give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we now have we have the U.S. 10-year at 3.9%, which now repairs a tremendous hole in the regional banks' balance sheets for a little while. Yeah. Gives them some relief to get out from underneath their problems. Maybe they can restructure some of their existing debt and whatnot. It buys them another 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. You let off the brake every once in a while, and then move with traffic, and you let them win, and let them win around. This is not a straight path to the end game,
right?
And the way I was literally just working on this month's Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter, and I was talking about this very thing. And and this is something I'll mention in other places, which is the following. So much of what's going on and what we're seeing today is anxiety on the part of the people who I'm convinced that Powell is doing what he's doing, and they can't handle the anxiety of it because they're still not completely convinced of this. And so they need that perfect moment where it says, yes, he's on our side.
Right.
And it's literally shadow projection, anxiety projection. And dude, I get it. I've been walking this wall of worry, climbing this wall of worry about Powell for 2.5 years now, right? As one of the few people out there saying this is what's going on. And I get it. And in no way, manner, shape, or form I'm not sympathetic to that, because if you don't think that there's not a pit in my stomach every time something like this happens, of course there is. Like my reputation, everything about, all of this is on, like my entire life is on the line, right? On some, in many ways. But at the same time, we can't, there's multiple scenarios to think through on this. I mean, maybe it's on, as I've just described. And the other scenario of this is that Powell really has already broken something.
Okay.
And if Powell's already broken something, then he needed to do this now. And it's not because he's Arthur Burns. It's because something has broken that is something that I've said from the beginning. Powell will raise interest rates or keep monetary policy as tight as possible until he breaks something, and he will. But the thing that he will respond, the only thing he will respond to, is one of the major money center banks in New York being in trouble.
Right.
Okay. Nothing else will move him. Not UBS, not Deutsche Bank, not the ECB, not Sumitomo, not Mitsubishi Bank, none of the Sumitomo Bank, none of the Japanese banks, the European banks, none of them. Not even Wells Fargo, because that's San Francisco.
Yeah, so that's
only the New York money center banks will matter, because they are the heart of the plumbing and of the transmission system for monetary policy.
Right.
And so because of that, it'll be them. And maybe we've already broken. Maybe, these noises coming out of UBS or Deutsche Bank, have Citibank or BofA in trouble. And we know that both BofA and Citibank are in trouble, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely.
Now they Bank of America. Sorry, I know you know what BofA is, right? So sorry. So when you think it through like that, right? Maybe that's where we are, and we'll know right after. I think we'll know right after the first of the year, because right now we're into like end of the year book squaring. Everybody's like getting everybody's getting their quarterly bonus checks in order, yada yada yada, and and hey, if I can roll over another hedge fund and make an extra 3% this year, I'm going to, because I mean, how many hedge funds were on the wrong end of the basis trade? Which is what, again, zero hedge. This is where zero hedge does great work and then comes up with the wrong conclusion every time. It's Powell's fault that a whole bunch of hedge funds were, on the wrong side of the basis trade. And then he rolled them. And then, he did what he needed to do, or what he was in a position to be forced into this quote unquote pivot. And then a whole bunch of hedge funds get vaporized and have to cover a short position, and then create another leg to this bond rally, right? Because that's what happened, right? Like, how do you blame Powell on that?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's not Powell's fault, dude. That's the hedge fund's fault. Like,
exactly.
When I first started in the newsletter business, I had a 1.5 year track record of being wrong, because I was trying to fit a gold bull market scenario into a gold bear market. Right. Okay. And I had to learn very quickly that I was wrong. I'm like, the other day I joked, I said, I was so wrong so often that I could have qualified to become a hedge fund manager.
Well, hey, 1,000 a year vaporize themselves anyway. I mean, the turnover in the industry is insane. Everyone thinks it's like Stanley Druckenmiller and about 5 other guys. It's like, no. There's about 10,000 guys who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And they get killed.
Right. I know. And by God, I'm one of them. I'm like, and that's why I don't run a hedge fund.
I was a broker. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I don't know how. I mean, and I've had people like, dude, you could really run an ARB fund or this fund or that fund. I'm like, yeah, no. Like, have you ever played poker against me? I know exactly how I can't get away from my ace jack that I know is beaten by a pair of queens by a pair of queens that the guy's got. But I've got to see those queens. I'm going to bet all the way down the line. I'm going to make that guy show me his freaking queens. Like, dude, that was your money. I'm like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about the money. I care about being right. And guess what? In the market, that's like the complete wrong position
Complete opposite way
to be in the markets. Like, and people ask me all the time, like, why don't you trade? I'm like, because it's hard enough to recommend stocks to people and have your reputation be on the line. Forget it if I actually own the stocks that I've recommended to people. Are you kidding? Do you know how hard that would be? Like, I know my limitations as a human being, and well, for the most part, are no. This is hard enough to do. What this is already hard enough, right? So I'm just happy to I earn my keep based on how well I serve my patrons, and
that's great.
And then try and be entertaining about it along the way, and hopefully, educate some people as we do it.
Oh, totally. I need to do that very well, but it's really interesting. I quoted you in the room the other day with Mr. Slammy, and one of my buddies wrote me. He's like, "Who said that? That's brilliant." And I'm like,
"It's not me. It's my friend Eric Jung on Twitter, dude. He called it Mr. Slammy originally."
Mr.
And I'm like, "Oh yeah, here comes Mr. Slammy."
That's fantastic.
I always give credit where credit is due, folks. When I come up with a good one, it's mine. But when it's somebody else's, you always give people credit. And I've tried to get Eric onto the podcast to talk to him. He's like, "No, there are already too many people in this world who want my hide, dude. I can't do this." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough."
That's great. I was going to ask you about that because I just looked at your chart review on gold and silver, and 2 months ago, Mr. Slammy came in and pounded it under 2,000. Last month, we finally got it above 2,000 on the close. And then that crazy Sunday where we were, basically nearly hit 2,200 in Asia. Yep. And I should know better because I lived in Asia for 13 years. Of course, the U.S. traders came in and just absolutely monkey hammered it. Yep. Who is Mr. Slammy? Is Mr. Slammy the Fed and the regional banks? I'm sorry, not the regional banks, the money center banks? Is it the hedge funds? Who is doing
this? What's interesting? Yeah, no, Sean, it's a really good question. And I think Mr. Slammy at this point is different people. It used to be the Federal Reserve. It used to be, it used to be the Fed. Like, we cannot have gold breaking out because blah blah. That was an obvious answer, and it was clear. Mm-hmm. The entire, going back to some of the stuff that the guys at GATA did during the bull market from 2002 to 2011. They said, look, if you bought the New York Open during a 5x bull run. If you bought the New York Open and sold the New York close, you would have lost 70% of your money over the course of a 5x bull market. Okay,
Jesus Christ.
Lost. So if you started with $10,000 at the beginning when gold was at $250 an ounce and a 7x bull market, and sold it at the peak and then stopped trading it at the peak at 1911, a 7x bull market. If you had started with $10,000, you'd have ended with, and you bought the New York Open and sold the New York close, you'd have had $3,000 as opposed to $70,000 if you had just bought and held.
That's a trick that I thought only Gordon Brown could pull off. Oh my goodness, that's just the Brown bottom. Oh my goodness.
So who is Mr. Slammy at this point? One of the things that's been interesting, and I have to say that, getting onto a Palisades Gold Radio Twitter Spaces and chatting and meeting Vince Lanci for the first time was probably a good turning point for me because Vince is a fucking powerhouse, and it's definitely a guy you should have on your show. Okay. And so Vince and I have been hatching some arguments about what's happening in the gold market and the plumbing of the gold market and everything else. And it's all about this spread between Shanghai and Chicago, or Shanghai and London, and how the spread won't close. It goes on. It's like it's there, and it should immediately close. If a $40 price spread between Shanghai and London opens up, somebody should be able to arb that and get it done, and in 5 minutes, and bring it back into balance. And when it won't come back into balance, that's evidence. And I credit Vince on this completely. That's evidence that there's a soft capital control being put in place. That the gold's not being allowed to, physical gold's not being allowed to move and be stood for delivery, and that's that. And we also fundamentally believe that GLD and SLV will become the new gold and silver trading vehicles in the United States, and the COMEX and the LBMA will be deprecated to zero in order to stop the physical flow of gold out of the West east. Okay. Or if it does happen, it's going to only happen through registered and approved brokers, i.e., it'll be J.P. Morgan or it'll be HSBC with the imprimatur or with the blessing of the federal government to say yes, 50 tons of gold can go. So what's happening now is that every time the spread opens up and then it collapses quickly, it's because somebody sourced the gold and then pledged it to China. And that's what happened, I think, on that crazy Sunday night. And it was so big that you figure every vault owner in the world went to every one of their clients sitting with 100 ounces of gold in their, or 200 ounces of gold in their vault going, can we borrow your gold for 30 days?
Yeah.
Or 60 days, right? And then therefore then pledge it, and then we'll figure out how to get it back to you later. But we need this right now because we can sell it and we can give you 5% or 3% or whatever. We can give you we can pay you for your time. And right. And once that opens up, once that happens, then and I think that if that's the if that's what's, I think that's probably what's happening with every one of these. And it was just really epic the other night. So the Chinese put a short squeeze on the entire gold market. And it forced the world to come up with a whole bunch of physical gold. And it was you should look at this not as, this is one of the problems I have with gold bugs at this point. They're so beaten down. They have so much, PTSD over this. Like, stop thinking about it as an abused child. Start thinking about these things as opportunities. What does it actually mean? It means that the gold market is so goddamn fragile that somebody puts a 20-ton limit order on the Shanghai exchange and can move the price $100.
Yeah.
Like,
love that, Vol.
Your mind should be fucking blown. Like, everything you've ever bitched about is happening. And did you think it was all going to happen? Did you think it was all going to happen at once and they weren't going to fight? They weren't going to fight you for it, bro? Like, of course they're going to fight you for it.
Yeah, that was another good theory. I forgot. I think it was Byron King. What am I going? So they just moved the line back. It's now. It's not 2,000 anymore. It's 2,100 now, and they're gonna monkey hammer you down from there, and then they'll retreat again, and it's just tactical retreats from here on out.
And it's always a tactical retreat. And what gold bugs have to get out of their head is that they're not in control of the market. That they're not winning.
Right.
They are winning.
They are winning now. Yeah.
They have very powerful allies at this point, but those powerful allies are also incredibly good traders.
Which gold bugs tend not to be.
Which gold bugs tend to be pretty crappy fucking traders. Hi.
Exactly.
Guilty.
Exactly. Oh, I'm saying,
come on.
Oh, exactly. Every time it hits 10 on 2,000, it's like, let's go. It's like,
let's go. Let's go to $5,000 and win. No, dude, no, don't spike the football. You're going to get the 2,100 and then you sell. And then you take the lip. So it's that way. It really is. This is about anxiety and psychology more than it is about, about any rational discussion of the markets. And so who's Mr. Slamming? At this point, it's going to be anybody who sees the arbitrage between Shanghai and London and can fill that arbitrage.
Right.
Okay. Now, what they did in silver was criminal.
Yeah. Now that was my next thing. I didn't get enough of that from you. I'd love to tell me what happened in silver.
I don't know what happened. I just know that taking silver from $25 down to under 23 in 6 trading days was a buying opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's the way I have to look at these things at this point, because I'm like, really? You guys are that desperate to hold silver under $26? Like, who's like, like what rabbit dies when somebody's, whose rabbit dies when, silver crosses $26 at this point? I mean, I'm serious. Like, I'm trying to figure this out now. Like,
About one of the things I talked to Rick Rule, luckily, on one of our previous episodes, and he said, the market's driven by gold fear first, and then once the gold fear takes off, then the silver greed trade kicks in, and I think that might be one of those.
That's a good way of putting it. Rick's got always has a really good way of describing things in very simple terms. I've never interviewed Rick, actually. I should probably reach out to him one of these days. Yeah,
absolutely.
And but I'm a huge fan of Rick, and so what I would say is, yes, it's the fear and greed. The fear and greed trade is always hilarious. But I still see silver as an industrial metal, and because of that, and I think, and I also like to think of silver as the industrial leading indicator for the tech sector, as opposed to copper, which is the industrial metal for the base level economy or the industrial sector of the economy, right? So there's the electricity sector, copper. in the electricity demand, copper, and then there's technology, silver. And I think if you view them that way, and then and because of that, they both take on a little bit of monetary character, because at the same time they also respond to inflation and central bank policy and potential for war and all the same things that drive gold prices on a daily basis, like government, faith in government and all the rest of it, to a lesser extent drive silver and copper prices. And don't kid yourself, they are both metals. They are both incredibly politically charged metals.
Yes.
And so they have that in common with gold. Like, these are all the most important and politically charged assets in the world: oil, gold, silver, copper, Bitcoin, all the stuff that I cover twice a week on the market reports. There's a reason why those are covered enough, and then U.S. Treasury bonds and the Dow. Like, you can really get a good sense of what's happening in the world geopolitically if you just reduce the world to about 8 to 10 markets, strategically important markets, and then think about them in terms of the incentive structure of the people who are in positions of power to move them to their own advantage, because these are the levers that move the world.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Microsoft is not a lever that moves the world. Tesla is not a lever that moves the world. Tesla is the third derivative of the lever that moves the world.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Neil Ferguson talked about that too. He said, the whole point of an empire is basically to acquire commodities at below cost. And I think that's such an important point. It
is. It really is a tremendous point, actually. And it's one that was hard one for me, because I didn't come at this originally from that perspective. I came at it from a kind of doctrinaire Austro-libertarian interest rate theory environment, and it took me a long time to learn the geopolitics of it. And I remember the first time I sat down to talk with Alex Craner, he started using the term collateral, and I'm like, the fuck is Alex talking about? Like, what the fuck are you talking? And then I'm like, within 15 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, Alex is brilliant. And I have so many things to learn. It was literally, and I never, it's like, and I'll be sitting there chatting with somebody, and I won't give this away because I'm just sitting here listening to them talk, and my brain is like churning through all this information. I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to learn.
Well, credit to you. You pronounced rehypothecation correctly, and that's super important as well. Because that was something.
Well, I mean, again, like, and Alex is one, and Alex is the guy standing there going, dude, like, you taught me so much freaking about the euro dollar, this, and like, great, outstanding. Like, this is the design, the goal here is to constantly challenge ourselves to up our game, get better, and then figure out ways to reduce these very complex ideas into very simple, truths.
Exactly.
That people can then ingest, go, oh, I can listen to this one podcast and get a whole bunch of signal, and then I can go out to the rest of my day and go build bridges and patch parking lots, or whatever it is you do for a living, or push papers around, or whatever it is you do, right?
Right.
And we don't have to and we don't have to sweat that I missed this segment on Fox Business News while they're pushing out 5 seconds worth of information and 30 minutes worth of pharma commercials.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have that noise pollution on my Italian television, thank heavens.
I never do. As a matter of fact, the only time I ever watch it is honestly, the only time I ever watch Fox Business is when Danielle is on with Charles Payne. And the segment's less than 5 minutes long. I don't have the stomach for anything more than that. I truly don't. Because most of it is just a complete fucking wasteland. So totally. It's a waste of my time. There's no signal there. And what I tried desperately to do is to try and make sure. I've had people say this to me all the time. Say this to me multiple times, and it's humbling when you hear it. Which is that, dude, yours is the only podcast I listen to that is all signal and no noise. And I went,
that's lovely.
Wow, that's high praise. And then once somebody said that to me, I'm like, I now have to live up to that every time. Right. Because then it becomes a responsibility. Right. And then it becomes a thing. And then you feel the weight of that responsibility and that burden to always give people as much signal as possible, even though sometimes they are just tuning in for the pithy bon mots, and they just want you to say Klaus von Kami-Schnitzel or something like that. Right. So I don't know. I mean,
fantastic. That's wonderful though. Taking the other stuff, I know how great you are when you cover the metals and stuff, but you did mention Bitcoin, and you said
Mhm.
this wasn't Mr. Slammy here. This was
Yeah.
healthy profit taking because it ran 60%.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I felt you trying to quell the paranoia in this area, which is
Yeah.
great.
You can see, well, you can see it. Remember, Sean, we have a private discussion forum on Slack, right?
Mhm.
And the crypto forum, like you want to talk about the crypto forum on my Slack, like, oh my God, the amount of, oh my God, here comes Mr. Slammy. Oh my God, like, guys, you just had a run from like 26 to 43.
Yeah.
You
He
don't
did
think that
okay.
somebody out there is like not a Bitcoin maxi and a religious fundamentalist and is just in it for trade?
That I don't think most of them
Maybe
understand
that
that at
might
all.
be it. Like I'm not like, and I love these people, and I love their enthusiasm, and I love all of it. But there comes a point where you just kind of have to like throw water on everything. You go, dude. And it's the same thing when it goes down to 8,000, or it goes down, right? I have to fight constantly with those that will then turn around and go, oh, I went to 16, it's going to 5, it could collapse from here, and then they're gonna take. I'm like, no, it really isn't, because there's the chart, and the chart's telling me it's not going to do that. I was like, let's
Right.
wait, and the and then once I know we've reached a bottom in certain things, or a top, when people start telling me that the kind of basic technical analysis that I do, and you being a patron, you know the kind of
Yeah.
technical
Mhm.
work that I do. And if anybody's confused as to what I'm talking about, I do let out a market report here or there to the public sphere on my YouTube channel. That's about the only new content that ever shows up on YouTube. So once a month, I'll throw one of the patron market reports out there. You can watch what I do, right? And it's a very simple use of reading candlesticks with no and breaking highs and lows, and with no real. I don't use Fibonacci. I don't use I don't use any
Don't look
technical
at
indicators,
it.
ones whatsoever, other than probability of breaking highs and lows, and basic volatility statistics based on time
Mhm.
period. That's it. And everything else is just read the freaking chart. So
Mhm.
it's really simple. It's like reading a book. Um, and when people start telling me that kind of technical analysis is doesn't mean anything, I go, nah, we must be near the bottom or top,
Mhm.
because we've reached a kind of extreme psychology in the market
Yeah.
fund and markets move on momentum and sentiment. They don't move on fundamentals.
Mhm.
I've been trying to teach Dave Collum this for 4 years now, and I'm like, Dave, that markets don't move on fundamentals. Markets don't give a fuck about fundamentals. They never
No.
have. You want them to, but they don't. I mean, unless you're looking at annual charts, they don't move on fundamentals.
Right.
That's simple, right? So,
Mhm.
but it is what it is, and people have their illusions, and you can use them to your advantage or disadvantage, as the case may be. So, um, but at the same time, Mark, they can continue to, the people who are in charge of the markets, who think they're in charge of the markets and have a whole lot of money to deploy in an anti-profit driven way in order to achieve some other goal that's orthogonal to the profit, the monetary profit. I have a real fundamental problem with the efficient market hypothesis for this
It
very
doesn't work.
one, it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
two, it's because politics exists and power
Yeah.
exists outside of the profit motive of a particular trade.
Mhm.
Like, people are motivated by things other than monetary gain,
Right.
moving markets
Mhm.
around. And so
Yeah.
you have to understand that, and you have to accept that. And this is the hardest part. You have to accept it. You have to go through the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief over the efficient market hypothesis and market fundamentals in order to get to the state of just being able to go, yeah, no, obviously someone like Soros or Schwab or whomever, or Janet Yellen, whomever, would go in and bomb the price of oil. They've already told you they're going to bomb the price of oil.
Mhm.
They've told
Yep.
you what their incentives are to bomb the price of oil. So when they do it, they don't care about making money. What
That's
they
right.
care about is that at the end of the day, they get the policy they want, and they will take the short-term hit to their balance sheet, because, by the way, it's your balance sheet that they're
Yeah.
playing with.
It's not their money anyway.
It's
Yeah.
not their money in the first fucking place. But on, like, this is not
Yeah.
freaking rocket science. If I were
Exactly.
an evil emperor, I don't know what, maybe the thing is I'm just a touch enough with my dark side to understand it. Like, look, dude, I know what Emperor Palpatine version of Tom looks like, and y'all are fucked if that guy ever gets any power.
Yeah, I don't tempt me, Frodo. Definitely,
Yeah,
yeah,
don't tempt me, Frodo.
absolutely.
Exactly. Like, don't tempt me, Frodo. No, exactly. Like, you guys have no idea the crap that lurks around in the back of this, the machinations that lurk around the back of this brain. But then again, being in touch with that allows you to go, oh, because that's what they're going to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. If I can, I just want
Sure.
to. This is the last thing. I loved what you were saying about this, and I cracked up. I wrote about this earlier in the week. Sultan Al Jabbar in Dubai, just absolutely taking a dump on the Cup 28, going, there's absolutely no evidence that anything we do is going to get us 1.5 C lower or it's going to matter. But you also mentioned that, yeah, we got high energy prices in Europe, which we are,
Mhm.
and it is freezing here. I'm still not used to this cold weather. What
Mhm.
do you mentioned something about Germany? Like, Martin Armstrong talked about Germany breaking up.
Mhm.
That Bavaria would be the first one to go. I actually stole that prediction from him. I thought that was brilliant. I got a lot of Bavarian friends who want out, as well, anecdotally.
Oh, then they better stop. Then they better stop voting CSU,
Yeah,
and they better start voting AFD real fucking quick.
yeah, and
Okay,
and that's why they want to ban
this
them,
is the
right?
cope, right? And you use the term COP 28. I like the term COPE 28
Go
personally because
28,
that's
yeah,
exactly what happened, right? They all went
yeah.
out there, and
Oh,
John Kerry started haranguing us, and Al Gore started complaining, like, "Look, I invented the internet. I understand that we can't do this. We're all gonna die." Like, no, Al, you're gonna go broke.
yeah, that's right. And you're not going to be able to run your house. What is this house? Is like a powerhouse, right?
Strong and singular, folks. Not like this, like they do it down here in the South, like this. Get the fingers out of the way, get it up against the black background. There you go. Like, do it right. Like, and that's exactly what happened at COP 28 or COP 28, and was great. COP 27 was just as bad. But they're at that point where they have to keep pushing us they have accelerated the rhetoric. When they go, the more apocalyptic the rhetoric, the more desperate they are.
Yep.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you have to realize that. It also means that the more cornered they are, and that then you have to ask yourself, okay, what are they going to do next in responses? If we keep saying no, then what? How are they going to ratchet up
Right.
how are they going to ratchet
Yeah.
things up further in order to get us to submit? Because you know they're going to make us do that. Because every time you approach a narcissistic abuser with opposition, eventually they just pull out the goddamn baseball bat.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, so first they try to bully you, then they try to shout at you, then they try to like belittle you and demoralize you, and then if you still stand there, then they just pull out the bat and go, "Why are you making me beat you? Why?
Yeah.
I don't understand. You're such a bad person. I don't want to be doing this, but I have to beat you." And this is we're very close to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I mean. I know we're not allowed to talk about it. That's what COVID was. It's the
Right.
first instance of that, and everything and you can see what's coming next. And this fucking Obama movie, Leave the World Behind, is a perfect example of him telegraphing how they're going to beat us up next. Okay, and I want you to take that into consideration, because it's well beyond revelation of the method. It's now the method of revelations, right?
Right.
Of in a sense, and you have to like really think about that. But what's happening in Germany is profound. Like the AFD or the IFD, if I want to be British about it, which I don't. So AFD. I love my friend Alexander Mercouris, but when he says IFD, I'm just like AFD. So the AFD is now the dominant party by a significant margin in all of the former East Germany. We're not talking, you may see the polls up on Europe Elects on Twitter or whatever, and they're polling 21, 22% nationally. They're polling 35 to 37% in places like Thuringia and Saxony-Anhalt and not Brandenburg, but and a few others. So understand that. Now, what does that mean? Well, the state elections for a lot of those states are happening this year. You have the current traffic light coalition polling at about 33% nationally, and then polling at what, 15% in East Germany? Like,
Right.
so, and then interestingly enough, in Berlin, AfD is the second leading party next to the Greens.
Talk about your
Berlin,
horseshoe.
Berlin as a thing is a mess. As a
Yeah.
political entity is a mess, right?
Yeah.
Or it's Berlin is green territory, but the area, but the state around it is now AfD territory, right?
Right.
So what you have is, and the problem, of course, is that the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, which is Angela Merkel's party, and I've been trying to get some help on this from some friends of mine behind the scenes, and unfortunately, I have to like parse through the German and the jargon, and I don't always get it right, so I'm not quite sure. But there's something seriously going on here between the Supreme Court shutting down the budget over the use of the COVID relief funds to give that to Ukraine, and how does that happen if the CDU isn't the one behind the scenes and the industrial might of Germany putting pressure on that to say that's enough? So have we reached that moment in Germany where even the German establishment is like, industrial establishment, like, that's it? They've reached the same point that our commercial banking interests here in the United States and the Fed have said, nope, that's enough. No more. Right? And we're not going any farther. We may lose this fight, but we're not going to give in. We're not going to give an inch. Look, Powell and company may lose here in the United States, just like the German industrialists may lose in Germany, and AfD may never win in Germany. Like, it's very possible, folks. We could put up the resistance, and the resistance can fail. We don't blow up the Death Star. We don't dance with the Ewoks and all the rest of it. Like, but at the same time, that doesn't invalidate the fact that you should at least try, and you should not at least understand what. And then again, what does winning or losing actually look like? Because look, Davos and company, they need a total win to win.
Right.
They have no other option than to enslave the entire world here.
Right.
They've already lost the global South. The question now is whether they are going to actually get any bits and powerful pieces enough of the West to put up enough of a fight to be able to like draw this thing out for another 10 or 15 years. And then I got news for you. The only people they're going to abuse in this process is us. Why? Why are you making me beat you? And so then the question is, for all of us, is how do we avoid getting beaten by these people? Like with the ugly stick.
Right.
That's the hard part. That's the question that everybody should be answering for themselves.
Yes.
And everybody has a way of answering that for themselves. And, for me, this is simple. Support your community and local banks. Right. Support your local industries. Yeah.
Proprietors, shops, everything like that.
Use cash when you can in order to make sure that the money circulates. The money that's circulating through your economy, 1.5% of it doesn't go to Goldman Sachs up in New York.
Right.
Like every time you use your credit card, that money is leaving. 1.5% of that money is leaving with every transaction. Right. Use cash. Spit in the eye of a globalist. Go take $1,000 in cash out for your expenses this week. Force Starbucks to take cash again. Right. Make Starbucks, cash. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a MAGA version of make Starbucks. Make Starbucks take cash again. Right. Make Starbucks not suck. That would be even better.
That'd be even better. Yeah. Luckily, I don't have Starbucks polluting my town here.
Well, yeah, you're in Italy. There's actually good coffee. Like, I'm in America. Like, the only good coffee I get is at my house.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like, I have enough people come over and go, dude, you still like drink swamp water. I'm like, yeah, I was trained to make coffee by my dad, who was NYPD. The guy drank anything as long as it was hot, and didn't give a shit if it was burned. He put more milk in it. Like, it just kept going. Like,
that's it.
So I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is, right? So, but I'm encouraged to see what's happening in Germany. There is the potential for the current German state to fall apart.
Right. Yeah.
But it will be, but it's a low probability at this point. Let's watch the state elections in East Germany this year, because that will set the tone. the FDP, the Free Democrats, are now polling so low that if they stay in the coalition any longer, they're going to lose their place in the Bundestag, because you have to, because in any state government and or national government in Germany, you have to poll at least 5% to get any representation whatsoever. You get either 5% or nothing, and then your 5% goes to the other parties. So Die Linke is now pretty much destroyed, and the FDP is in the process of being destroyed as well. So, you know, Davos likes this idea of being able to use to fashion together these ridiculous coalitions that then leave them with a veto. With their one guy that's in there, it's like 7%, winds up vetoing everything and running the country, which is how the Greens have destroyed Germany. And they've done it through the German upper house, not the German lower house. So I don't know if have you heard that rant from me about this?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
No.
So just so everybody understands, so the German upper house is organized by state, right? So Hesse, Brandenburg, Saxony, Anhalt, Thuringia, and they vote, however, as a block. So you form a government in these states the same way you would form a government at the parliamentary level. They form a parliamentary government, and it's, you know, and they'll crap together whatever fucking horseshit coalition they can get. But what Merkel did was put the Greens in as minor participants and like a super majority of the German upper house. And then the Greens just sit there back and hold their nose like Greta Thunberg and go, I refuse to vote for that unless I get what I want. And so, you know, the state of Brandenburg may have 7 freaking votes in the Bundesrat. The Greens have 1 vote, and they force through a veto the rest of the rest of the state to vote that way, because there's no proportional representation. So they don't vote. So the parties don't vote on party line; they vote on state lines as vetoed voting blocks. So the Greens at this point control like 47 or some insane number of seats in the German upper house out of the 63 that are there. So they are setting the agenda, which then neuters the Bundestag, which then, you know, so even if there's a collapse of the coalition, right, it won't matter, because whatever's passed in the Bundestag won't get past the Bundesrat, the upper house, the German Senate, until the Greens have been removed from the state governments. So this is why the state elections are so important, and why Merkel's refusal to allow AfD to be in any state election, a state government, is so important, because AfD could then turn around and do the exact same goddamn thing. Except in this case, it would be, you know, AfD is never going to make a coalition with the Greens. Now the question is whether the CSU will get enough goddamn backbone now that Merkel is gone, and or, you know, the guns being pointed at their children, to form a government. If Thuringia votes 36% AfD, right, who's going to make up the other 14% to make the coalition work to get a government in Thuringia? Right?
Right. Wow.
That's the problem. All of the other parties refuse to, so they have to get an outright majority to win, to get a state government. And then if that happens, then they'll just go to the German Constitutional Court and declare them domestic terrorists and take them off and take them out of the situation. That's also happening within German politics. The Die Welt and they're all making these arguments now. The Greens are now going, you know, are going to try and make, they're trying to declare, like Trump, they're trying to declare that AfD cannot be a viable party. Just like Trump can't be a viable candidate. They're doing the exact same thing. It's the exact same process. Because they cannot lose Germany. And this has to end. And this only ends with, I'll be honest with you, Sean, this only ends with shooting people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not advocating this. I'm telling you that, you know, I joke on Twitter all the time. This is why I'm along both gold and guillotines, folks.
Yeah.
But I'm being both flippant and serious, as a, you know, I engage in black comedy all the time, which is why I wear black shirts. But because, you know, the best kind of comedy is the kind of comedy that has real pain in it, right?
Yeah.
What is comedy? It's tragedy plus time. So, but what's happening in Germany right now is tragic. There's no democracy. There's no. These people fucking hate They hate us so goddamn much that they don't care. And so this is what people have to understand. And I know that a lot of Germans understand this. Like they understand their own German politics and their own German political system as well. They should, I would hope, as well as all I can do is, explain it to the outsider because they're under siege the same way we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's incredible. Incredible.
No, it's been going on for years. I've covered this, the ins and outs of this for 6 years. Because when I first started getting into this, I had somebody reach out to me, someone within the German political hierarchy, and and in many ways the German opposition, to explain to me all this because I didn't understand it. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, if this happens this way, the Greens will get a majority in the German upper house. This was back then. This was back in 2018. And once that happens, the whole country is going to fall.
Right.
And here we are in 2023.
Yeah. Wow.
And Annalena Baerbock and Robert Habeck are running the country.
That is fascinating stuff. It's great to know because they're right here, and the European Union, which I think is kind of on. I wouldn't say it's on its last legs because they'll do anything to keep it going. But it's it's a disaster.
It is a disaster for so long. and it's a disaster from a human toll. Like all of this. Everything I've said today comes from this deep wellspring of knowing, of seeing how this stuff affects the actual lives of real people, and the actual, like, all the anxiety and all the fear and everything that we're all feeling, and some of us can describe it and some of us can't, and we're looking for someone to actually help us, like me, like the two of us, like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put a face and a name on this stuff so they can go, oh, that's what I'm feeling. That makes sense now. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, great. And if I've done that in any way, manner, shape, or form, then, job well done on my part. Outstanding. Let's move on to the next thing that we can figure out to allay people's fears about next, right? It's still destroying people.
Yeah.
Right. It's still like destroying our ability to, it's destroying their immune systems. It's destroying their desire to eat right and to take care of themselves and take care of their families and be good parents and, and show up for work and do a good job. And because who can live like this shit? Like, it's terrible. Like, it's just awful. And you see that everywhere. Whenever I go out into the freaking world, I just look around. I'm like, all I see are a bunch of really unhappy people.
Yeah.
And it just tears my heart out. It really does. And, what you hope is that you can get, you can try and make people's lives a little bit better. If by nothing else, then having them name their fear and understand their anxiety a little bit better. Then once you understand something, well, then you have some control over it. Now you have some ability to, deal with it in some way. It's, in a way, it's kind of what we do is kind of, financial therapy or political therapy, right? So
indeed, geopolitical financial therapy. I like it. We need to open up a club or something. Come speak to us. The doctor is in.
And just wait, Sean. Like once we get really good at this, like then that they're going to want to license it.
That's how you know it's
that's how you know it's important, right? Groups people are allowed to do it.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, thank you so much. We've actually got over. I'm thrilled to have met you finally. You absolutely delivered an immense amount of information. My brain is just not used to this Friday activity at all. So thank you so much for being with us today. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. This is Tom Luongo at Gold, Goats, and Guns newsletter. We will put a link in here. I can't encourage you enough to sign up and read it. He is absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. It was excellent.
Thank you, Sean. Have a great weekend, and to everybody, have a wonderful Christmas. We don't talk between now and then. Because,
that's right.
And Merry it's not Christmas fucking holidays. It's have a nice Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, there we go. All right, we're out. Take care.